She smirked at her father's casket and whispered, "You won't see a penny." But when the will was read, she got exactly what she gave him. Nothing. They said grief came in waves. For me, it came in bills, burned letters, and a cold chair beside an empty hospital bed. My wife died when our daughter was only 6. I remember the way her tiny hands clung to mine at the cemetery, asking when Mommy was coming back. I told her the truth. Never. And that was the first promise I kept. We had nothing after that. I worked double shifts in a mechanic's garage. At night, I washed dishes at a diner that didn't ask questions. I sold my wedding ring to buy her a winter coat one year. She never knew. I packed her lunch every morning and pretended we were like every other family. I learned how to braid her hair by practicing on a mop, stayed up late learning how to sew when she ripped her dress for the school play. When she cried at night, I read her the same book over and over until she could sleep. I wasn't perfect, but I was always there. She was a bright kid. Smarter than me, no doubt. Top of her class. Always asking questions I didn't have the answers to. I didn't finish school, but I knew how to save. Every extra tip, every bonus, it went into a jar marked college. I told her she could be anything. She believed me back then. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The walls were thin, and the heater wheezed in winter. Still, she'd fall asleep to the smell of bread and the sound of me quietly counting change in the kitchen. I never let her see the stress. Not when the landlord raised the rent. Not when the truck broke down. Not when I started coughing blood and couldn't afford to get it checked. She got older, faster than I expected. High school came and went. She got a scholarship. I cried in the bathroom the day the acceptance letter came. Not in front of her. She hated when I cried. The night before she left for college, I made her favorite dinner. She barely touched it. Too excited. She was already gone in her mind, already somewhere with city lights and new people who didn't smell like motor oil. I drove her to the dorms. She didn't want me to come inside. Said it was too crowded. After she walked away, I sat in the car for hours. Just sat there, staring at the door she disappeared through. Eventually, I drove home. Her room stayed the same. I didn't touch a thing. Sometimes I'd sit on her bed just to remember the sound of her voice echoing in the hallway. The calls came at first. Short, polite, efficient. "Hi, Dad. I'm fine. Busy. Talk later." Later became once a week, then once a month, then silence. I left voicemails. I sent messages. Birthdays came and went. I sent cards, small gifts. One year, I didn't even get a thank you. I kept sending them anyway. I found her on social media. New hair, new accent, new friends with names I couldn't pronounce. She said she was self-made. She posted photos of expensive dinners, conference rooms, cities I'd never seen. She looked happy. I told myself that was enough. I got older. My hands started trembling. Work was harder. The garage replaced me with someone younger. The diner shut down. I started selling things. Her old piano, my tools, the watch my father gave me. It wasn't enough. Some days I didn't eat. Some weeks, I didn't hear another voice except the radio. I tried visiting her once. Took the bus to the city. Found her building from the return address on one of the Christmas cards I mailed. I waited outside until she came home. She didn't recognize me at first. I hadn't shaved. My coat was too thin. Her eyes widened when she realized who I was. She invited me in. Her apartment smelled like vanilla and something floral. She offered me water. I tried to tell her how proud I was, but the words tangled up in my throat. She smiled politely, nodded, checked her phone. I wasn't angry, just tired. She introduced me to her friends as someone from back home. Not as her father. Not even by name. I didn't correct her. That night, I slept on the bus station bench. I never went back. She stopped responding after that. I didn't blame her. I kept her photo on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. The color faded, but I still looked at it every morning. The nurse who started coming around was kind. Her name was Mary. She checked my blood pressure, refilled my prescriptions, made me tea.
Sometimes we talked.
She reminded me of my wife, not in how she looked, but in the way she listened. She never rushed me. She laughed at my bad jokes. She brought soup on rainy days. I asked her once why she was so kind. She said, because someone should be. I didn't tell her how much that meant. I started writing letters. One to my daughter, another to the bank, a third to the lawyer, just in case. I wasn't afraid of dying. I'd been alone so long it almost felt like peace. I didn't tell my daughter I was sick. Didn't want her pity. Didn't think she'd care. She didn't come when I went into the hospital. I left her a message, but it probably got lost. Or ignored. Mary was there. She held my hand. She read to me. She laughed when I remembered something funny about the past.
She was there the moment I left.
They told me I wouldn't hear anything after, but I did. I heard the silence that followed. The mechanical beep that turned into a flat line. Then a hum of voices. The shuffle of shoes. The sound of a body bag unzipping. And then, somewhere far away, a voice I knew. My daughter. Cold, amused. You won't see a penny, she said. He died broke. Just like he lived. She laughed.
Laughed.
Like everything I gave her was a joke. Like every scar on my hands, every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every second job, meant nothing. I'd already signed the will. Long ago. She wasn't in it. Not because I hated her. Because I loved her enough to let go. Because love, real love, isn't always returned. But it should never be mocked. I gave her everything once. Now I had nothing left to give. Except the silence she gave me. That was enough. I was 20 when I left home. I didn't look back. My father stood by the car with a packed lunch in his hand, but I was already halfway across the lot. I told myself I was just excited, just in a rush. The truth was simpler. I didn't want anyone seeing us together. He looked old.
Worn.
Like the kind of man who still paid in coins and carried a handkerchief.
College changed everything. Fast.
I dropped the small-town dialect. Swapped my name on resumes to just initials. Told people I was independent, raised myself. And in some ways, I believed it. I'd been emotionally on my own for years. Dad never yelled, never raised a hand, never said no. But that was the problem. He was silent. Silent when I cried about bullies. Silent when I asked why we didn't have what other families had. Silent when I stopped inviting him to parent-teacher meetings. I needed direction. He gave me freedom. It felt like abandonment. Success came quickly. Internships, promotions, networking parties. I learned to speak the language of boardrooms and brunches. My father didn't fit anywhere in that world. I invited him once, out of guilt. He arrived in a shirt 2 sizes too big and shoes that scuffed against marble tiles. I introduced him to my coworkers as a friend from my hometown. He smiled and didn't correct me. I hated that. He wrote sometimes. Letters. Long, emotional, unedited things. I stopped reading them after the third. It felt like guilt disguised as affection. I was building a life. He kept trying to pull me back into a version of the world I'd worked hard to escape. I started seeing him as a weight. Something to carry out of obligation. I didn't answer every call. Sometimes I lied and said I was busy. Sometimes I really was. But I never made the time. One year, he showed up at my apartment. Just appeared at the door, holding a grocery bag with something homemade. He looked thinner than I remembered. I let him in, made tea I knew he wouldn't like, and watched the clock while he spoke. He said he was proud. I nodded. He tried to hug me before he left. I gave him a sideways pat and ushered him toward the door. That was the last time I saw him. Months passed. My boyfriend asked once if I had family. I said no one important. It was easier. Cleaner. I liked control. I liked people seeing me as sharp, composed, untethered. I didn't want questions about a man who wore flannel in the summer and called cell phones fancy radios. A few weeks before his death, I got a voicemail. His voice sounded tired. Not sick, just distant, like a radio station you could almost hear. He said he hoped I was well, that he missed me, that he had something to send. I deleted it. At a party, someone joked about parents dying broke and leaving nothing. I laughed and said, "That'll be my dad. Nothing but a tin box and bills." The joke landed. I didn't feel bad. He wasn't part of my life. Not really. Then came the call. A nurse, Mary, said she'd been with him at the end. That he'd spoken of me every day. That he kept a photo of us in his wallet until the leather peeled. I asked if there was a funeral.
She said yes. Gave me the time.
I debated going. I didn't cry when I saw the casket. Didn't feel much. Just annoyance at the cheap flowers and cheap wood. He would have hated it. He used to joke about being buried in something built to last. People whispered. I heard my name a few times. One woman said, "That's his daughter." Like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. After the service, the lawyer called everyone into a room. Small space. Chairs too close together. I sat in the back. Figured it'd be fast. A formality. He read the will. No mention of me. Not a line. Not even a sentence. Everything, what little there was, went to the nurse. The room fell silent. I waited. Surely there was a mistake. A second page. A sealed note. Something. Then he pulled out a letter. Said it was for me.
Typed.
Dated.
Signed.
My dear girl, it began. Already I hated it. He wrote about the first time he held me. About the way I used to wrap my fingers around his thumb. About how, even when we had nothing, I gave his life meaning. How he hoped I'd understand someday that silence wasn't absence. It was sacrifice. He said he left me nothing, not out of anger, but because I already took everything, his time, his youth, his heart. And when I gave nothing back, he learned to stop expecting. He hoped someone else would love me better. That maybe losing what I thought was mine would teach me to value what never had a price. I folded the letter in half and left it on the chair. People looked at me like I might cry. I didn't. Not then. Not when I walked out. Not when I passed the casket again. I just whispered, "You finally gave me something back." The emptiness. And maybe that's what I deserved. The hospital room was quiet. I could hear the machine counting my breath, like it was measuring time left in teaspoons. I didn't fear death. I feared dying without being remembered. Not as a man who failed, but as one who tried. Mary visited every day. She brought warm towels, soft words, and the kind of presence that made silence feel safe. She never asked for anything. When I apologized for the mess, she laughed and said I was the easiest patient on the floor. She reminded me what kindness looked like. I asked her once if she believed in heaven. She said she believed in what people left behind. Memories, stories, the weight of their love or regret. I asked her if I'd leave anything behind. She didn't answer with words. She just stayed a little longer that day. I knew my daughter wouldn't come. The phone stayed silent. The door never opened. I used to check my messages, thinking maybe she called, and the nurse missed it. After a while, I stopped hoping. Instead, I started writing. I wrote letters I never sent. I addressed them to no one. I poured everything I couldn't say into ink. Pages filled with the kind of honesty I was too scared to give her face to face. I told the truth. I missed her, but I didn't miss who she became. One night, I couldn't sleep. The pain in my chest was sharp, constant, like something buried deep had finally begun to rot. Mary sat beside me, reading aloud. Her voice blurred into memory. I saw my daughter as a child again, dancing in the kitchen, wearing socks too big and a crown made of tinfoil. I remembered how she'd squeeze my hand at crosswalks and tell me she'd never leave. Promises made with baby teeth and big eyes. It made the silence now feel louder. I revised the will that night. Mary tried to protest, said she didn't need anything. I told her it wasn't about need. It was about who was there when it mattered. She didn't argue after that. Just held the pen while I signed. The next morning, the world was dimmer. My breath felt like it had to fight its way out. I knew I wouldn't see another sunrise. I wasn't scared. I'd already said my goodbyes, even if no one heard them. Mary was there when the end came. I remember her voice, soft and steady. She said thank you. I wanted to say it back. I think I did. Then everything slowed. Then stopped. Later I heard things. Not like voices or angels, just echoes. Footsteps. The rattle of wheels. Somewhere, far off, I heard my name. Then her voice. My daughter. She laughed. I recognized that laugh. She was talking to someone. You won't see a penny, she said. He had nothing to leave. The words were sharp. Familiar. Like ice down the back of my neck. She didn't cry.
She didn't ask.
She stood near my body and treated it like an afterthought. I wondered, for a moment, if she'd always been this way. Or if I'd helped shape her into someone who learned to measure worth in inheritance and absence. When they lowered the casket, I listened. No prayers from her. No trembling voice. Just silence. Later, the lawyer opened the folder. Papers rustled. People leaned in. My name was read like a file number. No one wept. He read the contents carefully. The house. The savings. The insurance. My old toolbox. The photographs. My journals. All left to Mary. Then he read the note. The one I wrote for my daughter. The one I folded twice and placed behind the final page. She listened. Her hands didn't move. The room stayed still. I told her she taught me something I never expected, to love without return, to give without reward. I wrote that I forgave her, not because she asked, but because I didn't want to carry bitterness into the next place. I told her I hoped, one day, when the applause faded and the rooms emptied, she'd remember what it felt like to be held by hands that gave without taking. I didn't expect a tear. I didn't expect regret, but I hoped for silence. The kind that comes not from indifference, but from realization. That was enough. She got exactly what she gave. After the will was read, no one spoke. My daughter sat still, her face unreadable. The nurse stood quietly at the back of the room, hands folded, as if she didn't want to be seen. People started whispering. Some glanced at my daughter with pity, others with judgment. She didn't flinch. She just stared straight ahead, as if waiting for someone to say it was a mistake. No one did. The lawyer cleared his throat and announced that everything had been executed according to the client's final wishes. He offered condolences, nodded politely, and left. The room emptied slowly. Some offered quick hugs to Mary. A few muttered that it was all sad. Then they walked out, already moving on. My daughter remained seated, the letter still in her hand. Unfolded, creased, unread a second time. Outside, the sky was gray. It wasn't raining, but it looked like it should. She stood, walked out alone, and didn't look back. There were no cameras, no reporters, no performance. Just quiet steps toward a car too expensive for the street it was parked on. In the weeks that followed, she didn't mention the funeral to anyone. When asked, she said she had no comment. Work resumed. Meetings continued. Her schedule stayed full. But something had shifted. She started going through old boxes. Found photos she hadn't looked at in years. Images of scraped knees, broken crayons, and a man with oil-stained hands holding her like she was gold. She opened drawers where old cards were stored, the ones she never read, the ones he sent year after year. She began reading the letters he'd written, each one more difficult than the last. His handwriting changed over time, shakier, more tired, but always full of affection. Never blame. In one, he apologized for not knowing how to help her dream. In another, he said he hoped her silence meant she was happy, that he missed her, but didn't want to be in the way. By the fifth letter, she stopped reading aloud. She went to the house, the one he left to Mary. She didn't knock, just stood across the street, watching as the nurse watered plants, opened the window, and hung up fresh laundry. There was peace in that home, the kind that couldn't be bought. She stayed only a minute. That night, she wrote a letter. To no one. Or maybe to herself.
She didn't know what to say.
There wasn't an apology strong enough. There wasn't time travel. There was only memory and consequence. She stopped calling herself self-made. In interviews, she began crediting her father. He raised me, she'd say.
Alone.
Quietly. It didn't bring him back, but it softened something inside her. On the anniversary of his death, she visited the cemetery. Alone. No entourage. No phone. Just her and a folded piece of paper she didn't read aloud. She placed it under a stone and whispered, "Thank you." There were no tears. Just a long pause, then the sound of her footsteps fading. In the end, she got nothing material. But she received something else. Clarity, maybe. The weight of truth. The ache of mischances. The kind of inheritance that doesn't fill a bank account, but hollows out pride. He had nothing to give her, except what he always gave. And now, finally, she knew what it was worth.